What if the most terrifying legends of humanity aren't just bedtime stories or warnings to keep children from wandering into the woods? What if they're fragments of something real, something older, darker, and closer than we think? Tonight, we're going to step into the shadows of three horrifying tales. These are not your average ghost stories. These are legends rooted in centuries of whispered accounts, chilling testimonies, and events that refuse to be explained at a village that vanishes after sunset, devouring those foolish enough to linger. A sleepless woman, seen across the globe, who appears before tragedy strikes, and a house so cursed that police lock the case files forever, too afraid to reveal what they found. But be warned, once you hear these stories, you may never sleep the same again. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself, because reality is about to feel far less safe. Story 1. The village that disappears at night. They warned us not to go. Every local in the nearby town repeated the same words when we asked about the village hidden in the woods. Don't stay there after sunset. Don't even look for it. The forest remembers. Of course, we didn't listen. We were young, arrogant, convinced that every legend was just a mix of folklore and fear. There were five of us: myself, my best friend Daniel, a couple named Marta and Ivan, and our guide, an older man who seemed uneasy from the very moment we left town. The road was barely visible, swallowed by roots and branches. By the time we reached the village, the sun was sinking, staining the sky a strange, bruised purpled. At first glance, it looked ordinary, a cluster of wooden houses, most of them abandoned, their roofs sagging under moss. A small chapel stood at the center, its bell tower crooked as if it were bending under an invisible weight. But the silence, that was wrong. No birds, no insects, no rustle of leaves. Only the crunch of our boots. Do you hear that? Marta whispered. Hear what? I asked. Exactly. Our guide, who had been quiet all day, finally spoke. We shouldn't be here. The sun's nearly gone. Daniel laughed. Come on. It's just a ghost story. We'll make a fire, drink, and leave in the morning. What's the worst that could happen? The old man didn't laugh. He set his pack down and muttered a prayer under his breath that we built a fire near the chapel. For a while, the warmth and the flicker of flames gave us comfort. Marta told a joke. Ivan opened a bottle of vodka, and Daniel started teasing the guide about his fear. But when midnight came, the air shifted. That it was subtle at first. The wind died. The fire dimmed, though the wood was dry. Then the bell in the chapel rang. Once, twice, a low, metallic groan that felt wrong, as though the bell were cracked and rusted. Yet it carried through the night with a dreadful clarity. Who's ringing it? Ivan asked. But when we looked, the tower was empty. Then the village changed. The houses we had seen in daylight seemed to sag further. They were blackened, their windows gaping like open mouths. Smoke curled from chimneys that had been cold before, and figures, tall, indistinct, moved among the shadows. Stay close, the guide hissed. He clutched a small wooden cross and held it out like a weapon. The figures came closer. Their eyes glowed faint red, not like fire, but like embers buried deep in ash. They didn't walk. They drifted, their movements jerky, as if the world itself stuttered around them. Marta screamed. One of them was only a few steps away now, its face a blur, shifting as if dozens of mouths were trying to speak at once. Daniel grabbed my arm. We need to run. But where? The paths twisted. The road we came from was gone, replaced by more houses, more ruins. The forest itself had vanished, time fractured. I remember running, Marta sobbing, Ivan shouting prayers he barely remembered, the guide screaming at us not to look back, that I T some point. I stumbled. The ground beneath me wasn't dirt anymore. It was stone, slick and cold, like the floor of some underground crypt. And from below, I heard whispers, dozens of voices murmuring, rising, until I realized they were repeating our names. When I scrambled up, the others were gone. The next thing I remember is dawn. I was lying on the edge of the forest, clothes torn, throat raw from screaming. A farmer found me and brought me back to town. I asked about my friends. No one had seen them. The guide's belongings were found near the chapel, but of him, nothing. Marta, Ivan, Daniel, all gone, as though they'd never existed. The worst part? When I looked in a mirror later that day, I barely recognized myself. My hair had streaks of gray, my face was lined, aged decades in a single night. Doctors couldn't explain it. They told me it was shock, trauma. But I know the truth. The village doesn't just disappear at night. It takes, it keeps, and those who escape never really leave it behind. Even now, when the wind is just right, I swear I hear that bell ringing in the distance. Story 2. The woman who never sleeps. They say she's been seen for centuries. A pale figure in black, appearing at the edges of human tragedy, wars, plagues, disasters. Some call her the sleepless widow, others the watcher. When I first heard the legend, I thought it was just another ghost story. But then I met someone who swore he'd seen her. And after listening to his account, I've never slept the same again. The first records in old Italian village journals from the 1830s. During the cholera outbreaks, there are notes from terrified priests. They describe a woman standing at the edge of the cemetery every night. Always the same, tall, thin, dressed in black from head to toe. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. Point one entry reads, she was there again tonight. The dogs howled, and the air turned so cold my breath froze. I shouted at her, but she did not turn her head. And when I looked away for only a second, she was suddenly gone. The next day, 3 more children were buried. The records end abruptly a month later. After the priest himself was found dead in his bed, his eyes wide open, as if he had been staring at something in the dark. The fire in South America nearly 2 centuries later, reports came again. This time in a small South American town in the 1990s. People began whispering about a strange woman seen on the streets around 3 a.m. She didn't belong. Her clothing was old-fashioned, her face pale, her walk too steady, too quiet. One shop owner remembered locking up late and seeing her standing under a flickering street lamp. She was staring at me, he said, not moving, not blinking, just watching. Days later, a catastrophic fire ripped through a local textile factory. Dozens died. When investigators reviewed security footage from the nights before, they found something chilling. At 3:02 a.m., a tall woman in black passed by the factory gates. The footage glitched as she came closer, her face blurred, distorted, as if the camera lens itself refused to capture her. The frame then froze for 6 seconds, and when it resumed, She was gone. A personal encounter. The man who told me his story was named Victor. He was a night watchman at a small hospital. He'd heard the rumors before, but never believed them. Until one night. It was just after 3, he told me, his voice trembling. I was making rounds, checking doors. Then I saw her, standing at the end of the corridor. He described her in detail, tall, draped in black, skin so pale it seemed to glow under the dim emergency lights. Her eyes, he stopped, swallowing hard. They were open, but she didn't blink. Not once. She just looked at me, like she'd been waiting. Victor said he froze. His radio crackled with static. The lights flickered, and then, without moving her lips, he heard a voice. Not yet. The next morning, a gas leak in the hospital kitchen caused an explosion. Several people were injured, but Victor had swapped shifts with a colleague at the last moment. He swears she saved him or claimed him for later. Who is she? Some believe she's a ghost. Others say she's a demon or even an angel of death. But the strangest theory is that she isn't human at all, that she's a manifestation of time itself, appearing before tragedy as a fixed point, an unavoidable omen. There's one detail all witnesses agree on. She never closes her eyes, never sleeps. A historian once tracked reports of her appearance across the globe. Each time, within days, something terrible followed: a bridge collapse, a mine disaster, an epidemic. His notes were never published. He was found dead in his office, his body slumped over his desk, his eyes staring wide at the ceiling. The warning: if you wake at 3 a.m. and the world feels wrong, the silence too heavy, the air too cold, don't look toward the corners of your room. Don't check the doorway, because if you see her standing there, pale and still, eyes unblinking, you may not survive the week. And if she whispers, "Not yet," then it only means your time hasn't come. Not yet. Story 3. The Forbidden Case files. Some houses are abandoned because they're old, unsafe, forgotten. But others are abandoned because people know better than to step inside. In a small American town, there's a house like that. Boarded windows, collapsing roof, weeds devouring the porch. Kids dare each other to touch the front door and run. Adults cross the street when they pass by. Nobody speaks about it openly. The official record says it's just another condemned property. But in 2003, the police opened a case so disturbing that it was locked away, sealed, and never spoken of again. The first calls, it started with phone calls. Residents claimed they heard screams from inside the house at night. Sometimes it sounded like chanting, sometimes like crying. Lights flickered in the windows, though there hadn't been electricity in years. At first, the police dismissed it as teenagers trespassing. But then people started disappearing. A homeless man who sometimes slept on the porch, a journalist investigating local legends, and a teenage girl, last seen telling her friends she would spend the night inside to prove she was brave. None of them were ever found. The investigation finally, officers were sent in. What they found still haunts those who survived. The air inside was wrong, thick, heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. The walls were covered in strange markings, burned into the wood as if by fire. But there were no scorch marks anywhere else. One officer reported sudden dizziness. Another's nose began to bleed uncontrollably. Their flashlights flickered even with fresh batteries. But the strangest part? Every clock in the house, wall clocks, pocket watches, even a broken wristwatch lying on the floor, all showed the same time. 3:15 a.m. One officer tried to document it with a camcorder. The footage later showed the group entering the house, voices tense. Then the tape cut to static. When it resumed, the team was outside, panicked, their clothes torn. They had no memory of leaving. The sealed report the case was closed within weeks. Officially, the explanation was structural danger. No further investigation necessary. But years later, one retired officer confessed on his deathbed. We didn't shut it down because there was nothing there. We shut it down because there was too much. Things no one would believe. He refused to say more, except one chilling detail. The missing girl's voice was heard upstairs, calling for help. But when they broke down the door, the room was empty, except for a single, child-sized handprint burned into the wall. The house still stands. Windows nailed shut, warning signs posted. But locals whisper that sometimes, if you walk past at night, you can still hear sounds inside. A girl crying, a man shouting, or laughter, the kind that doesn't sound human. Teenagers tell stories of a dare. If you press your ear against the front door, you'll hear a clock ticking on the other side. And if you're foolish enough to step inside after 3 a.m., you may never step back out. Point one boy, years ago, swore he saw someone watching him from the upstairs window. A pale face, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. But when he pointed it out to his friends, the window was empty. The truth, some say the house was built on cursed land. Others believe it was used for occult rituals in the 1960s. But the strangest theory is this. The house itself isn't haunted, it's hungry. It waits until 3:15 a.m. when time itself falters, and then it swallows whatever dares to enter. That's why the files are locked. That's why no one speaks of it. Because once you know, once you start asking questions, the house notices you. And sooner or later, it calls you home. Asterisk, asterisk, if you've made it this far, you're braver than most. But here's the real question. Do you think these are just legends? Or do you believe something truly unexplainable lurks behind these stories? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me which story unsettled you the most. The village that disappears, the sleepless woman, or the forbidden case files. And if you enjoy exploring the darkest corners of myths, legends, and true horror, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and ring the bell, because we have even more terrifying stories coming soon. Remember, sometimes the scariest things are the ones we can't explain. And the next story might just be about something lurking in your own backyard. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.